Welcome, class. We have now reached the fourth ideal, and we will look at Shulamit's troubled dream of love refused. Verse 2 of chapter 5, we are reading the words of Shulamit. I was asleep, but my heart was awake. A voice, my beloved, was knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is drenched with dew, my locks with the damp of the night. In this reflection, Shulamit has a troubled dream. It's caused by a problem in the marriage relationship resulting from a lack of sexual adjustment. Shulamit dreams of refusing Solomon's sexual advances and of losing and finding him again. This is only a dream, and all of the particulars need not have actually occurred. In this verse, Shulamit describes Solomon's approach to her. Note, to sleep while the heart was awake signifies a dream. Shulamit dreams that her beloved seeks admittance to her. He comes a long way, and he comes at night. The dew in his hair makes it evident that it is springtime or summer. He is asking with no expectation of delay. The Hebrew word for beloved is dad, pointing to sexual love. Solomon refers to Shulamit as my sister, that is, one of equal rank, and my darling, the Hebrew word ra'iyah, for darling, singles her out as one freely chosen by him for intimate relationship. By my dove, Solomon sees Shulamit as the one loved by him on account of her purity, simplicity, and loveliness. Let's read verse 3. I have taken off my dress. How can I put it on again? I have washed my feet. How can I dirty them again? She replies to Solomon in this dream. In the dream, Solomon approaches Shulamit by asking her to open herself to him. This is Solomon's sexual advance to her. That's in the previous verse 2. In verse 2. However, Shulamit refuses Solomon's advance on the basis of the excuse found here in verse 3. She is already lying in bed. Her undergarment is off, showing that she is sleeping in the nude in bed, which was quite customary in the ancient world. Furthermore, her feet are washed, and she is quite unwilling to get up. Even for Solomon's sake, she is unwilling to do that which is disagreeable to her. It should be remembered that what is happening is only a dream. However, it is one based on reality. Faulty excuses have actually been given in rejection of sexual advances. Let's read verse 4. My beloved extended his hand through the opening, and my feelings were aroused for him. The next verse, verse 4, describes Solomon's attempt to get to her. Solomon, so very anxious to get to his wife, stretches his hand through the hole in the door, either to try to open it or as a plea to her to open the door. Regardless, Solomon's efforts to have the door opened by putting his hand through the lattice demonstrates his longing for Shulamit. Meanwhile, Shulamit, seeing the longing, begins to respond. The Hebrew word translated my feelings literally means my bowels, which is the biblical concept of the seat of the tenderest emotions. Thus it marked the expression of deep sympathy, and it's also used that way in Isaiah 63:15 and Psalms 40:11. Let's look at verse number 5. I arose to open to my beloved, and my hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh on the handles of the boat. I opened to my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and had gone. So Shulamit began to respond, but it was too late. By now Solomon had given up and departed. Shulamit arose to open the door. As her hands touched the bolt of the door, they became wet with liquid myrrh. Liquid myrrh is myrrh that flows over, that drops of itself. This act may refer to a custom of a lover placing perfumed ointment or oil on the bolt of a girl's door when he comes and she is not in. Solomon came perfumed with costly myrrh as for a festival. For to be with Shulamit was to Solomon a feast indeed. Some of the myrrh dropped off on the handles of the bolt of the door at the time Solomon stretched his hand through the lattice window. For all practical purposes, she may as well not have been at home. By the time Shulamit opened the door, Solomon had already turned away. The Hebrew word is a strong one and points to the fact that Solomon completely turned away from Shulamit in utter disappointment over her failure to open up to him, as well as her giving such flimsy excuses. Let's look at verse 6b and verse 7. My heart went out to him as he spoke. I searched for him, but I did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer me, said Shulamit. The watchmen who make the rounds in the city found me. They struck me and wounded me. The guardsmen of the walls took away my shawl from me, said Shulamit in this dream. Now Shulamit runs out into the streets of Jerusalem to search for him. The expression, my heart went out, means to be deeply impressed. She now recognizes she did not respond properly to the deep impression of his loving words, so she quickly dresses and runs out to find him. As she seeks him, she fails to find him. As she calls him, she hears no answer. In the course of wandering around the city, the guardsmen find her, and while mistaking her for a prostitute, treat her roughly. In order to escape arrest, she leaves her upper garment and manages to get away from them. This was similar to Joseph's experience with Potiphar's wife in Genesis 39:12, except that in the case of Shulamit, it was only her outer robe that was left behind. Let's look at verse 8 and 9. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, as to what you will tell him, for I am lovesick. What kind of beloved is your husband, O most beautiful among women? What kind of beloved is your beloved, that thus you adjure us? Shulamit next turns to the daughters of Jerusalem and implores their aid. She recruits the aid of the daughters of Jerusalem to help her find Solomon. If they do find him, they are able to tell him that she is lovesick for him and will respond to his advances. Her attitude has changed. In verse 9, the daughters of Jerusalem responded by asking what makes Shulamit's husband so special that they should bother to help her in her search. What is so special about Solomon that Shulamit so pleadingly implores them to aid her in finding him? Let's look at verse 10, 11, and 12. We see the answer. My beloved is dazzling and ruddy, outstanding among 10,000. His head is like gold, pure gold. His locks are like clusters of dates and black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside streams of water, bathed in milk and reposed in their setting. In answer to the inquiry and sarcastic questions of the daughters of Jerusalem, Shulamit answers and points out in detail why Solomon is so special to her as over against all others. She begins with a general description. His appearance combines the dazzling whiteness of his flesh with the redness of his blood against that flesh. Thus Solomon was white and ruddy, a mark of royalty in Lamentations 4:7. He is marked out by this from among 10,000. Next, Shulamit begins to describe specific features of Solomon. His head is like gold, that is both precious and fine. The Hebrew word translated pure gold means free from all inferior metals. Solomon's hair is like rolling hill country. It forms waves and lines as hill upon hill. In contrast to its whiteness and redness, his hair is very black. His eyes are are moist and washed in milk. That is, his pupils are swimming in the clear whites of his eyes. Verse 13 through 16. His cheeks are like a bed of balsam, banks of sweet-scented herbs. His lips are lilies dripping with liquid myrrh. His hands are rods of gold set with beryl. His abdomen is carved ivory inlaid with sapphires. His legs are pillars of alabaster set on pedestal of pure gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His mouth is full of sweetness, and he is wholly desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. In verse 13, Solomon's cheeks are described as a flower bed planted with sweet-scented herbs, and that which comes from his lips is precious liquid myrrh. His hands are like cylinders of gold, while his fingernails are like embedded topaz. His abdomen is like a work of art formed of ivory with sapphires placed in it. His legs are like pillars of marble, while his feet are as gold. His entire aspect is as majestic as the Lebanon towering over Galilee, and precious like the choice cedars. Solomon's mouth, that is his organ of speech, is full of sweetness. Shulamit concludes her description by pointing out that all of him is wholly desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. Chapter 6, verse 1, 2, and 3. Where has your beloved gone, O most beautiful among women? Where has your beloved turned, that we may seek him with you? My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of balsam, to pasture his flock in the gardens, and gather lilies. I am my beloved, and my beloved is mine, he who pastures his flock among the lilies. In spite of the marriage problems between them, in public, Shulamit refrains from criticizing Solomon, but builds him up instead. Once again, the daughters of Jerusalem respond in verse 1 in chapter 6, but this time with a different tune. Shulamit's description of Solomon has aroused their interest, and they are now eager to help her in her search for him. Indeed, this is no ordinary husband. But as the dream comes to an end, the help of the daughters of Jerusalem is no longer needed, for Solomon suddenly reappears in verses 2 and 3 here. My beloved has gone down to his garden means that Solomon has come back to her, for the garden is Shulamit herself. This indicates that Solomon has suddenly shown up and they are reunited. The dream ends with the reunion refrain of verse 3 declaring that they belong to each other.